Howdy, y'alls. Welcome back to ANTH 489. It's me, Dr. Edwards. This time here to help you out with Module 4. So, this week we dive into the next two sections of your capstone project. Let's see here, theory and lit review. So, and that corresponds to section 3 for the section on theory, application of theory, and lit review is section 4 of the final capstone project, and you can look that up on the final capstone prompt and rubric. Okay. Before I go any further, because I want to try to give you some insights on how to go about looking for theory, applying theory, and how to conduct a literature review. Before I get into that, before you try to attempt any of that, it's absolutely critical that you have your research question nailed down. Okay? Because if it's still kind of loosey goosey, if it's not reasonably focused, you're just gonna be kind of shooting in the dark. Okay, so gotta have that. And if you don't have that yet, please contact me. I can help you sort it out. Okay, maybe over a quick Skype meeting we can brainstorm, and I can help you get it nailed down. Okay, so. That said, moving on to theory. Now, in the written portion of this announcement, I've shared some insights, so be sure to read over those. I've also shared an excerpt from one of my pieces where I share my theoretical orientations and frameworks section. For a manuscript I'm working on. So please do not share it with anyone else. But it should give you an idea of how you can take different theories and bring them together to create a unique and insightful perspective. Okay? Now I stress that what I share there is far more than you need to do. Okay, so don't look at it as an example of like, oh my God, I have to create this giant thing. No, all right, not at all. What it's an example of is how you take different theoretical frameworks and understandings, right, and weave them together to create a cohesive and complementary perspective onto your thing. Okay, your problem, your issue, your focus. I hope that makes sense. So don't get overwhelmed with the size of it, right? It's not about size. In this case, it's about putting the pieces together. Now, if you remember, back in Mod 1, I outlined and shared several very good sources on anthropological theory. Okay? Articles, websites, books, yeah. Now, depending on what you want to pick and articulate your theory so that it's going to be useful for whatever you're looking at and wanting to understand and gain greater insight into. Okay? You can think about it as how are you going to look at your problem? Okay? You got to define your perspective. Okay? So, and another key part is it needs to clearly speak to both the discipline as a whole as well as your specific concentration. Okay? For example, we're all environmental anthropologists here. So, as an environmental anthropologist that's interested in natural resource use, I probably would not pick, I don't know, linguistic theory to try to study natural resource use. You see how linguistics doesn't necessarily fit what I'm trying to look at. Now, just to throw you a curveball, you might use some linguistic theory, right, about how people talk about their resource use. Okay, now see how that's more focused in and connected to what you may be exploring, or for this case, for me. Um, and we might actually further explore that in what we call symbolic anthropology, or having a symbolic perspective, which is all things around us are signals. Okay, are symbolic of values and norms and practices. Okay, and so you can interpret all the things that we see and that surround us around a particular problem, right, as reflecting insight into them. So, you know, yeah, symbolic anthropology can be really helpful for that. Another one that I share in the written portion is I really like cultural ecology and political ecology. These are two very nice complementary theoretical perspectives. Cultural ecology is really looking at the human environmental relationships, right, in a given thing, place, whereas political ecology is looking at how that thing is negotiated, right? The systems of power that surround and facilitate it. Okay, so you can see that one might be more kind of ground level, whereas the other is the overarching kind of policy that is subjected to it. Okay, very complementary. Yeah, when it comes down to it, there is dozens upon dozens upon dozens of theoretical perspectives. Okay, I would suggest you might actually have some initial thoughts like, oh yeah, no, I love cultural ecology. That's great stuff. Marvin Harris and Julian Stewart, all that good stuff. By the way, those are all listed in the Mod 1 theory resources that I shared. So, yeah, take some time, pick through it. All right. If you're looking at environmental issues, which I suspect you all are, that you're going to want a theoretical perspective that offers insights into it. Now, you've probably heard me saying, highlighting more than one theory. All right, anthropologists rarely use a single theory to look at anything. Okay, because a single theory is pretty limited. It's only going to offer you a very narrow window. Okay, and since anthropology is pluralistic, that's a tongue twister for me. We often see theories as offering particular insights, so you can take them, stitch them together in a cohesive manner. And it gives you a broader perspective, right? So I would like to see you all using at least two theoretical orientations, theories, frameworks. All right, because that is going to help you out in actually looking at your thing and understanding it. Looking at my notes here. Yeah, so kind of touching back on, since theory is all about how you're going to look at your thing, you want to explore the presence of it, factors that influence, impact it, as well as the socio and cultural implications of it. Okay. Yeah. I actually strike that. I was about to suggest something, and since you all aren't actually doing field work for this, that would not be a good idea. So ignore me there. Yeah. Oh, and another final point. Your theoretical orientations need to be ethically sound, ethically grounded. All right, you can't go being ethnocentric. Okay, like that would should be really obvious. You can't, and this will actually, by using a combination of theories, this will help kind of address any shortcomings of one theory, sort of thing, which makes it more ethically sound. Okay. Yeah, like it would be inappropriate for me to, I don't know, pass judgment on a group that uses particular resources the way they do, but is just against my own personal values of how that resource should be used, right? That would be me imposing my own bias into the situation, and that is, that's not ethical. Okay, when it comes to anthropology. So I assume all that's old hat for y'all. Okay, touched on that, and that. Moving on to the literature review. Now, as I say, I think in the written portion, it's as much of an art as it is a science doing a lit review. There's a ton of stuff out there, and it's kind of like finding lots of needles in a really big haystack. Okay, but don't let that scare you off. Right? It's just a challenge, right? And I'm going to try to give you some insights to help you with it. So as I said before, make sure you have a focused research question. Right? Without that, looking at the existing literature, it's going to take it from being far too broad to being nice and relatively focused for what you're focusing on. Okay. So yeah, a note about credible and scholarly sources. Personal blogs, Wikipedia, things like that are not credible scholarly sources. Avoid them like the plague. Just don't go there. We often have what we call gray lit, which can be useful for some things, and that's stuff that is produced by institutions, particularly like governmental institutions. So, like the Bureau of Land Management, the Bureau of Land Reclamation, the Department of the Interior, right? They produce all sorts of reports, right? And they're credible in some ways, but they're not. One thing that they don't have is they're not subject to peer review. Okay, but for this, you can consider them a semi-credible source. Okay, again, we call it gray lit because it's not fully credible, but it can be helpful. Now, a good, credible, scholarly resource is typically a peer-reviewed piece. Okay, peer-reviewed at a minimum level, I guess. So, like syndicated newspapers or media sources. They have a certain level of peer review that they do, that they're not going to post a story out there that is completely bogus. They might not have all the information, but yeah, newspaper articles, news stories, things like that, those are okay, those are credible. Maybe not so scholarly though. The best is what we call peer-reviewed sources, which are like peer-reviewed journal articles, right? So go look at or search through Shapiro Library use the anthropology research database, and you can search all these scholarly journals, and all articles in a scholarly journal are peer-reviewed. Okay, that means that other disciplinary experts reviewed it, gave feedback on it that needed to be addressed, all right, and it validates it, if you would. It's like you're like, okay, yeah, no, you passed the standard. Check. This is sound work. So yeah, that's what I would suggest that you focus, and you can do that as I showed you before. Go into Shapiro Library, use the Answer Resource Database, and you can search for good stuff in there. And there is a ton of it. Now, the stuff that you search for, you want to be kind of thinking about. Well, for milestone 1, you should already have kind of the background, right? Any background research information that you need to, just to understand your issue, that should already be done. So you want to use the same sort of process though that you did for that, except this time you're going to be focusing in to look for particular cases, examples that are both similar to what you're focused on, as well as ones that aren't so good. the value of this is that you can see benefits from certain sources, like, oh, hey, this is how they approached it. These are the sorts of things they saw. I like all that, right? And that might even help you with your theoretical orientations. Hint, hint, wink, wink, because all peer-reviewed work will have a section on their theory, right? So yeah, that would be a good thing. To help streamline the process for you all, what I suggest is reading the abstracts. All right. Not just like, oh, that looks like an interesting article, and then go and try to read the entire article to see if it fits. Put an extra step in there. You can usually click a button within Shapiro Library for the abstract. It's usually right there. And it's a short paragraph that summarizes the work. Okay, so you can quickly read that short paragraph and be like, yeah, no, this is clearly has no value to what I'm researching. Okay, and then get rid of it. And you find another like, oh yes, yes, this is good. This speaks to the things that I'm interested in. So yeah, when you are looking for good examples for to emulate, if you would, keep your eye out for those that tend not to work so well. Think of this as finding sources that highlight pros, benefits, right, and others that weren't so successful. That might help you actually highlight, oh, hey, well, see how they did this over here and it didn't work out so well. But by using this different perspective, all right, or approach, you can see X, Y, and Z. Okay, so that example counterexample sort of approach, those are good sorts of resources to be looking for. Um, yeah, I'm just double checking my notes here. Yeah, no, that's pretty. I don't want to drone on and on. So I know this can be a really frustrating and challenging process, so please do not hesitate, right, to get a hold of me if you have any issues, right? Some of you posted in the general questions forums. That's great. Yeah, I tend to be fairly available, so if you call me, chances are you're going to be able to get a direct response to whatever your questions are. And that way you don't get hung up, and you can keep moving forward. So, really looking forward to your all's milestone twos, your theory and your lit review. Just title them, section 3 and section 4. Give them the title of theory and lit review, and you should be just fine. Okay. Of course, full APA citations for the sources that you draw on. Yeah. Pretty normal stuff at this point. So, yeah, look forward to your all's work, and hope you have a great week. Take care, y'alls. Bye.